All right. Hello, everyone aiming for those top ranks in the UPSC exams. We're diving into something you'll definitely see in your papers and something that's super important for India's future, how the country is becoming more and more vulnerable to natural disasters.
Yeah, definitely a hot topic.
We're basing this deep dive on a really insightful article, got to give credit where it's due, from the Indian Express.
Always a good source.
It's got all the good stuff. The rising costs, specific disasters from 2023, and why India is in a tough spot, plus what needs to be done.
Lots to unpack.
There's one stat that's going to make you think over 90% of Indian households and businesses, get this, are under or uninsured. That's a crazy thought to start off with.
Definitely a bit worrying.
So this article it just throws out this number like it's nothing, $12 billion. That's the estimated economic loss from natural disasters just in 2023.
Big number.
Huge. It's a massive jump from the average we've seen over the past decade, which was around $8 billion a year. And this is from a report by Swiss Re.
They do some good work in this area.
Now, hold on to that 90% uninsured number, because when you pair those two things together, that's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, the impact on people if a really big one hits, it's hard to even imagine.
So to really grasp what we're dealing with here, the article highlights three major disasters that really shook India in 2023.
Yeah, those were rough.
First one, the floods in northern India and Sikkim back in July.
Oh, man, those were bad.
Himachal Pradesh especially really got hammered, and even Delhi felt it.
You don't usually think of Delhi being hit that hard.
Right. It's a scary thought when you consider how many people are packed into the capital.
Yeah, density makes a big difference.
Then just a month before that, there was Tropical Cyclone Biparjoy. It slammed into Gujarat as a Category 3 storm, no joke.
That was a big one.
This wasn't just a coastal thing either. The effects went way inland. Maharashtra, Rajasthan all saw disruptions, especially for shipping and industry.
Yeah, the ripple effects are huge.
And we can't forget about Tropical Cyclone Mishong, which hit in December. Chennai basically shut down with all the extreme rain, and of course there were serious economic losses there too. It really shows that no part of India is safe from this stuff.
No place to hide, unfortunately.
All right, so why is India so prone to these disasters? The article, it points to two main reasons. First, get this, the monsoon.
The irony, right?
I know, right? The thing that gives us life also kind of makes us vulnerable.
It's a double-edged sword, that's for sure.
How so?
Well, think about it. Monsoon seasons, obviously vital for agriculture and everything, but they bring these crazy intense periods of rain. And what does that lead to? Floods. And lots of them.
Ah, makes sense.
The article says, and this is mind-blowing, 63% of economic losses from natural disasters in the last 2 decades. Floods.
Wow, that's more than half.
Way more. And we've seen what these floods can do, right?
Oh, for sure.
Kerala in 2018, Uttarakhand back in 2013, both of those were just devastating.
Yeah, those images are hard to forget. So geographically and climate-wise, India is in a tough spot, that's clear. But the article also talks about this thing they call economic and industrial exposure, which I found fascinating.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. It's kind of a catch-22.
If you break that down for us.
Sure, so you look at Gujarat, Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, they're economic powerhouses. Together they make up almost 37% of India's total industrial output. But all that progress, it also makes them really vulnerable.
So the more developed a region is, the more they stand to lose.
Exactly. Gujarat, floods, cyclones, earthquakes, they're at risk for all of them. Maharashtra, Mumbai especially, floods and cyclones are a major threat. And Tamil Nadu, Chennai, they get hit by both monsoon floods and cyclones. It's a bit of a perfect storm.
Not a good kind of perfect storm.
Definitely not.
And while we've been talking a lot about floods, the article reminds us that we can't forget about earthquakes.
No, definitely not. Big one could hit anytime.
Big cities, Delhi, Ahmedabad, they're all in earthquake zones. And the article asks this really scary question. What if a major one hits one of these places? The impact could be even worse than the Bhuj earthquake back in 2001.
Yeah, the thought of that is chilling.
Especially with all the people living in these areas. And it really makes you wonder, is India prepared for something like that?
That's the million-dollar question, and that's what this article really makes you think about. So we've got a country that's geographically vulnerable, growing industrial centers in high-risk areas, a history of devastating floods and earthquakes. It's a lot to take in. What can we even do about all this?
Right, where do we even start?
Well, the Swiss Re report that the article uses, they have this three-step approach to building resilience. First, they say you got to identify the hot spots, the places that are most at risk. They want to use data to pinpoint those areas.
So Ahmedabad, Mumbai, Chennai, those kinds of places.
Exactly. Those are the places where we need to prioritize taking action, putting in measures to reduce the risk.
Okay, makes sense. So what's the next step?
Step two is all about risk assessment, using, advanced models and stuff to assess how exposed each region is and how much risk is accumulating there. It's about understanding the specific vulnerabilities of each region and coming up with solutions that fit those specific problems.
When you say advanced models, what does that actually mean? Could you explain that a bit more?
Sure, it's basically using really sophisticated computer programs that look at tons of different factors, things like historical data, the kind of rocks and stuff that are in the ground, projections about climate change, how dense the population is, all that kind of stuff. It helps us get a much clearer picture of what's at stake and where we really need to focus our efforts.
Got it. So identify the hotspots, figure out the risks. What's the last piece of this puzzle, this resilience puzzle?
The third step, it's all about what they call reinsurance solutions. These are basically like insurance policies for insurance companies. It helps spread the risk around and makes it so more people can afford to get insurance, even households and businesses. It's like creating a safety net for everyone.
So it's not just about cleaning up after a disaster. It's about being proactive and protecting the people who are most vulnerable.
Absolutely. And that's what we're going to dive into more after a quick break.
This whole idea of reinsurance is pretty interesting. Seems like a key way to address that insurance gap we were talking about. But how do we actually make that work in India? I mean, there are so many people who need that protection.
Yeah, that's the tricky part, right? Gotta get creative, find solutions that fit the different needs of all these communities. The article mentions something called microinsurance products, which could be a game changer.
Microinsurance, what's that?
Think of it like bite-sized insurance. It's designed to be affordable, something that low-income households and small businesses can actually manage. Like imagine policies specifically for farmers to protect them if their crops get wiped out by floods or cyclones, or for shopkeepers if an earthquake damages their store.
So breaking insurance down into smaller pieces, making it more manageable and targeted at the specific risks people face. That makes a lot of sense. It would be a lot more appealing than these huge, expensive plans that a lot of people just can't afford.
Exactly. And these microinsurance products, they can be offered through all kinds of channels like mobile banking apps or even those self-help groups. That makes them accessible even in rural areas.
Sounds promising. What about the government, though? Can they do more to encourage people to get insurance?
Absolutely. They have a big role to play in setting things up so insurance can actually thrive. Think government-backed programs, maybe offering subsidies or incentives, especially for those high-risk areas. Public awareness campaigns could be huge, too, just letting people know how important it is to be financially protected if a disaster hits.
So a team effort, basically. Public and private sector, everyone working together.
Exactly. And it's not just about money, either. Insurance can actually encourage people to take steps to protect themselves, which is really cool.
How's-
Say you own a home, and you know you've got insurance for earthquake damage. You might be more likely to spend some money to make your home stronger, retrofit it so it can actually handle the shaking. Or a farmer with crop insurance, they might try those sustainable farming methods that help reduce the chances of losing everything if there's a flood.
So it's about giving people a sense of ownership, like they're part of the solution, not just waiting for help after the fact.
Exactly. That's what resilience is all about. It's being prepared, managing the risks, not just reacting when something bad happens. Okay, so we've covered insurance and how to reduce risks. Let's take a step back and look at the bigger picture for a second. What happens if India doesn't get a grip on this vulnerability to natural disasters? What are the long-term consequences?
Yeah, that's the big question.
Well, the article, it doesn't sugarcoat it. It lays it out pretty clearly. Those $12 billion in losses this year, that might just be the beginning.
It's like this cycle, right? The more we develop and grow, the more we have to lose.
Exactly. And with climate change making things worse, more frequent and severe weather events, the potential for economic disruption is just going to keep growing. Think about industries being shut down, infrastructure destroyed, all the progress we've made just wiped out.
And the human cost, we can't even put a number on that. The lives lost, people forced to leave their homes, the injuries, the trauma.
Exactly. That's the real tragedy, and it doesn't always make it into the reports. We can't forget about the human side of all this.
It's a good reminder that it's not just about numbers and stats. It's about real people, their lives, their hopes, everything.
Absolutely. And the article goes even further. It asks us to think about what could happen to society and politics if we don't do anything.
What do you mean?
Well, imagine if these disasters keep happening, destroying communities, using up all our resources. It's easy to see how that could lead to unrest, political instability, even mass migrations as people flee their homes looking for safety and opportunities elsewhere.
Like a domino effect, one crisis leading to another.
Exactly. If we ignore this problem, it could unravel our entire society and derail our development goals.
I've got to be honest, this is starting to feel pretty overwhelming. It's clear the stakes are high and the challenges are massive. Where do we go from here? What can we do as individuals, as future civil servants, to actually make a difference?
That's the key question and the one we're going to tackle after a quick break.
Feels like we've opened up this whole can of worms. Escalating economic losses, communities at risk, and climate change just making everything worse. It's heavy stuff, especially when you're prepping for the UPSC exams.
Yeah, I get it. It can feel like a mountain to climb. But remember, as future IAS officers, you guys are the ones who can actually change things. This deep dive, based on that Indian Express article, it's giving you a solid understanding of what India is up against and why we need to act fast.
So it's not just about knowing this stuff for the exam, it's about actually using it to come up with solutions, right?
Exactly. Think about those essays you'll write, the policies you'll help create, the leadership roles you'll take on, understanding natural disasters, climate change, all this resilience stuff. It's going to be crucial.
We always talk about resilience in terms of bouncing back after a disaster, but you mentioned earlier that it's about more than that. What does a resilient India actually look like?
That's a good question. Building a resilient India, it's a big job, lots of moving parts. It starts with being proactive, like strengthening infrastructure, setting up early warning systems, and making sure building codes can actually withstand earthquakes and cyclones.
So thinking ahead, minimizing the damage before it even happens.
Exactly. But it's also about giving communities the tools they need to prepare for and respond to disasters. That means investing in community-based programs, educating people about the risks, giving them the skills to protect themselves and their families.
Building a culture of preparedness where everyone's involved, not just waiting for help to arrive.
Right. And let's not forget about technology. That's where you guys, with your fresh ideas and all that, can really shine.
How can technology help us build a more resilient India?
Imagine using AI and machine learning to make those early warning systems even more accurate, giving people more time to evacuate. Or using drones to check out the damage after an earthquake and deliver supplies to hard-to-reach areas.
That's smart. Using tech not just to react, but to predict, minimize damage, even find ways to develop sustainably.
Exactly. Think about using data to pinpoint the areas most vulnerable to floods, and then using nature, like restoring wetlands and mangroves, to act as natural barriers. Or developing climate-resilient farming methods so we can still produce food, even with all the crazy weather.
So moving past the old way of just reacting to disasters and taking a more proactive and comprehensive approach.
Exactly. Resilience isn't just about surviving, it's about thriving. It's about making India safer, more sustainable, more equitable for everyone.
All right, to sum it all up, this deep dive has shown us just how urgent this issue is. We've looked at why India is so vulnerable, what could happen if we don't do anything, and how crucial it is to manage risks proactively, involve communities, and use technology to build resilience.
And for those of you listening who are studying for the UPSC exams, remember, this isn't just about memorizing facts. It's about understanding the big picture, how development, climate change, and disaster preparedness all fit together. It's about being able to analyze these complex problems, come up with new solutions, and ultimately become the leaders who can guide India towards a safer and more resilient future.
This episode has been a real eye-opener for me. If you want to learn even more about this, definitely check out that Indian Express article. It's packed with good info.
And if you found this deep dive helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe. We're always covering important topics to help you ace those UPSC exams and become the leaders India needs.
Until next time, keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep working to make a difference in the world.